Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for subscribing. If you're new, I'm Travis and this is Susie. We're from the Wolf Hunters and we have a reaction video for you. We have this link right here. You can find that link in the description box, which is below the video. There's a blue link. Click it and pick it. You can request music, movie scenes, comedy skits, live performances, documentary stuff.
That's
I mean,
lots of choices.
the list goes on. You know what I mean? Whatever you can find on YouTube.
Whatever.
Today's video is brought to you by Kenneth, who has taken advantage of that.
And is bringing us the
deadliest preacher
in Appalachia.
Okay.
Kenneth says, this man lived about 10 miles from me.
What?
My father was a good friend. I met him once in the 70s and he was super nice to me. He even bought me an ice cream that day. When the FBI came looking for him, no one would talk to them. If any outsider mentioned his name, we didn't know who they were talking about. We didn't know about all of the crimes until after. Oh no, we didn't know about all of the crimes until after he was killed. He never committed any crimes in his community. He is still a legend to this day.
What? I'm so confused right now.
The deadliest preacher.
What am I about to watch?
Is there a movie about this? I feel like there's a movie about this person. Like, there's clearly this, I guess, documentary, but I feel like there's a movie about this person. Am I wrong? Or is that, like, just another story? I feel like there's, like, another preacher fugitive movie out there or something. Anyway, If I'm right, let me know. If I'm wrong, if I'm confused, let me know.
All right.
I'm excited for this.
Check this out.
Hit the like button, subscribe.
Feel free to comment below.
A fugitive on the run.
Oh.
Yes, you want, Hunter?
That was nice.
I'll tell you what.
The most wanted man in America, is that true?
He canceled every binding of ordinance against me, nailing it to his cross. Hallelujah.
What? That's beautiful. Do you live near that?
I know. That's cool.
Woo, that is
Beautiful.
gorgeous.
It's gorgeous.
It's gorgeous. 1934.
My name is
Oh,
Billy
this is
Dean
all bad.
Anderson. I was born in Pall Mall, Tennessee, just south of the Kentucky border. My grandparents raised me from a young age because my ma and pa, well, I'm not going to go there. I came into this world in the era of the Great Depression, but truth be told, we never noticed when it started or ended here in the mountains. Growing up as a boy, life was a never-ending cycle of working on the farm and going to church every time the doors would open. I mean, I went to school like other kids, but none of that stuff ever interested me at all. My favorite part of school was when our teacher, Miss Sarah, had traveled from Jamestown to teach us, and she gave each kid a writing pad and a pencil. She spent most of her time talking about reading and arithmetic,
Wow.
but I was usually lost in a daydream, drawing in that notebook. I filled every corner of every page with drawings.
That's so cool.
I drew outlaws like Frank and Jesse James, and some of my favorite Bible stories, like Daniel and the lion's den, and Jesus as he rode into Jerusalem on a donkey. These folks were my heroes, and I would get lost for hours.
Wow, that's really is a... I mean, I guess technically all of those people are fugitives, right? Like they went against the law of the time.
Yeah.
But it's like a rainbow of you know, from Jesus to Daniel, who I think disobeyed whoever was in charge at that time, and then James and Jesse.
Yeah, I would say there are some common things like bravery, like people that were brave, adventurous, risk takers, things like that. So it could be that part.
I don't really know about the first two very much. But I guess I'm going to find out. Maybe we'll find out why they're his heroes.
Yeah.
Hours at a time, dreaming of what life must have been like for them, out yonder, beyond those mountains. By the time I was in 8th grade, I felt like there was no use in that old schoolhouse. So I quit. Nothing they tried to teach me made a lick of difference in my life. Like most boys, I was pretty sure I'd end up spending my life toiling away in a logging camp, or even worse, hidden away in the darkness of a coal mine from sunup to sundown. So it was. I spent my youth learning as much as I could about living right, living for the Lord. I could recite pretty much any Bible verse.
Wow.
And soon, I got to where I'd heard our preacher preach so much that I could have pretty much delivered the sermon myself. In fact, by that time, I used to occasionally sit in for the preacher as sort of an apprentice. I lived for these moments, and they caused me to study the Bible more and to constantly seek a closer relationship with the Lord. It should come as no surprise that by the time I was 18, I submerged myself full-time in the ministry. That little church in the Wolf River Valley, it was my refuge, and I preached God's word with all my might. Before long, I got a reputation as a brimstone and fire preacher, and I like that.
Reputation.
I like to see folks get excited in church, and most of all, I love to see a soul get saved and be welcomed into the kingdom of God. One of the hardest things for a man to do in these mountains was to stay away from corn liquor. As a child, my grandparents had shielded me from the effects of this poison. Yet, as a man, I soon found out that he was all around. Heck, even the finest preachers would have a little nip before or after a sermon. I once heard a preacher proclaim that in heaven there would be plenty of possum taters and brandy, because heaven, it just wouldn't be right without them. And by the time I was in my early 20s, I began sneaking a little taste of apple brandy before each sermon as a way of tuning up for the sermon. And after a while, I would have another sip or two after the congregation had left. I began spending a lot of time with new friends. And one of the ways we would pass time, we would take our pistols down to the river and target practice. It all seemed harmless enough until one night in 1959, we all loaded up in my buddy's Chevy and we went to the drive-in movie theater in Jamestown. As the night went on, we had finished 2/5 of whiskey, and my buddy James said, "Hey man, let's go get some popcorn." But the problem was, none of us had any money. "Oh, don't worry about that. We'll just talk tough and scare them a little bit, and they'll give us what we want." So we walked to the concession stand, and James began asking for a free bucket of popcorn.
Alcohol, and they have guns on them?
Alcohol, guns, and an attitude.
But the usher, he wasn't having any of it. "Hey buddy, you're drunk. Take a hike, get lost." And in that moment, I have no idea what came over me.
Oh my.
But without thinking, I reached into my coat and I pulled out my .38 pistol. "Give us the popcorn and all the money in the cash register," I demanded. "Billy Dean, what are you doing?" James asked. But I kept that gun pointed right at that usher's face as he emptied $17 out of the register. "Here, take it. It's all I got." Now, I need to pause here for just a moment, because there comes a critical time in a man's life where the course of his entire destiny can change in an instant, depending on what decision he makes. And I didn't know it at the time, but that moment had come for me as I stood there with that gun pointed at that kid who was trembling so much the money was falling from his hands to the ground. But I'd never felt this type of power before. Something took over me, and I cocked the hammer. No, please don't," the kid begged. But I never blinked, and I pulled the trigger, shooting on purpose just 2 inches away from his head, and missing on purpose. All my friends were running back to the car. "Let's go, Billy Dean. Let's get out of here." But for just a second, time stood still. I had so much clarity in my mind. I like this. I like this power. And it was in that moment that I traded my Bible for a life of crime.
I feel shocked. Oh my goodness.
We loaded into the car, and we got out of there as fast as we could. The cops would surely be looking for us, and we needed a place to lay low. So we parked the car behind the church, and we spent the night hiding out in the sanctuary of the church that I preached in. Within a few hours, headlights were shining through the stained glass windows from all directions. Several police cars had the church surrounded, and they demanded that we surrender. Truth is, everyone wanted to walk out of that church right away because they knew what we did, but not me. It took all night until 10 a.m. the next morning before I finally agreed to turn myself in. And just like that, I was arrested as a first-time offender and sentenced to 4 months in jail. That's right. That night changed Billy Dean Anderson for the rest of his life. And scholars and historians have spent the last 50 years analyzing and debating just what went wrong for a mountain man that everyone seemed to like and said he was one of the finest friends you could have. He'd give you the shirt off his back. Everyone liked him, and he liked everyone, just as long as you didn't cross him or happen to be wearing a law enforcement uniform. After Billy Dean was released from jail, he spent the next year in and out of trouble in Fentress County, Tennessee.
Dang.
In 1960, he was arrested for beating an elderly man and robbing him of $85. While he was on trial, he stunned everyone in the courthouse when he suddenly made a mad dash towards the courtroom window, and he jumped from the second story to freedom. He led the sheriff deputies and the bloodhound dogs on a wild chase through the mountains.
Oh my gosh.
That folks still talk.
I'm trying to figure out how this happens. Like, I'm wondering if there's actually a medical problem, like in his head or something that like made him change his behavior. Although in this, I guess, journal or diary, I don't know if this is an actual entry that he wrote, but you know, it says that he felt power and control. I don't know if that's like a journal entry or whatever. But anyways, I had assumed that, like, the Appalachias Deadliest Preacher, like, I assumed that the story would be that he was committing crimes for the sake of people. But that's not what this sounds like. This sounds like literally he just changed.
Oh, almost like, I think there was a movie out about a guy who...
I thought it would be like Robin Hood.
Like rescuing, like, kids that have been abducted
and committing crimes to rescue.
Crimes in order to do that.
Yeah, I thought it would be something like that, like something like Robin Hood, like, oh, I'm committing crimes, but it's to help other people. But I don't think that's what we're seeing here.
So I wonder if in the first place he was leaning towards being a preacher because he did feel like some sort of a power and authority over people or something like that, but then got a taste of something else that also gave him that feeling, I wonder.
I guess so.
Or somebody mixed a bad batch of something and he had a sip and crossed some
like
wires.
I said, or there's some kind of, you know, problem in the mind that causes, sometimes there's stuff like that causes a change in like the, you know, in the way that you are. Anyway, I guess all we can do is speculate.
Yeah.
We don't know him personally.
See, we gotta keep watching.
Kenneth, you have to tell us more.
Yeah.
I mean, Kenneth doesn't know anything though, and neither does anyone from
That's
the
not his
neighborhood.
real name either.
Yeah, but you know, let us know your thoughts.
Talk about till this day. Now, after a few run-ins with the law, Billy felt like he could no longer get a fair shake with the local law enforcement. So, on the advice of his lawyer, he packed up his life and moved to Muncie, Indiana. At least he wouldn't have to worry about coal mining or logging. Heck, maybe he'd be able to land one of those factory jobs that so many folks before him had left the mountains for. Looking for a fresh start, Billy Dean Anderson arrived in Indiana in 1961. Yet there was one thing that he didn't realize would be waiting for him when he got there, and that was whiskey. That's right, and he continued drinking. Within months of arriving in Indiana, he was arrested for rape accusations of a 16-year-old girl and carrying a concealed weapon. Authorities in Indiana were unaware of his arrest record in Tennessee, so they allowed him to accept a plea bargain, and they lowered the charges to contributing to the delinquency of a minor. While in jail, Billy Dean managed to escape through an 18-inch hole in a vent shaft, and he evaded authorities for 6 hours before being caught again. For his actions, he was given 6 months prison time in the Indiana State Farm. But he was released early on good behavior.
He escaped through 18 inches? Is that what they said?
18-inch hole.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
However, within a few weeks, he was back in Muncie, where he was arrested again for disorderly conduct, malicious trespassing, and carrying a concealed weapon. So it was back in jail again for a few weeks, and then out again. One night, he was on a drunk, and he caused a brawl in a pawn shop, where the owner beat Billy Dean so bad with a baseball bat that he had to be hospitalized. He tried his hand as a mechanic, a tree surgeon, and a farmhand. However, just like back in Tennessee, he began running with a rough crowd. And the reality was that this up-and-coming outlaw would soon reveal that he was far rougher than anyone could have ever imagined. It seemed Billy grew tired of being involved in petty crimes. What he needed was to make a big score and to get some money in his pocket. On Friday,
I just remembered you were thinking of the movie Machine Gun Preacher.
Oh, I mean, maybe. I just thought I heard of... Yeah, that's a movie? Yeah, probably. But that's a different story.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
January 26th, he found his opportunity. He and a buddy were out drinking at the Cozy Lodge Tavern when suddenly Billy jumped across the bar and put a pistol to the bartender's head, demanding that he open the cash register. Chaos broke out in the crowd as Billy's sidekick blocked the door and held a gun on the crowd. A waitress attempted to run to the back when Billy opened fire on her. The two bandits took $2,600 cash, and as they were leaving the parking lot, they were engaged in a gun battle as they sped off into the night. By the next day, Billy was in jail again, but not for long. You see, he was getting a reputation as an escape artist. He often boasted that there wasn't any jail in the country that could hold him. Well, he lived up to that promise. Within a few days, Billy escaped through a small air conditioning duct to the roof of the jail, where he made his escape in broad daylight. Not one to stick around and wait for the law to catch him, the outlaw made his way back to Fentress County, Tennessee. On his first night back, he got into an argument with an old friend during a poker game, and he shot his friend. When the sheriff arrived on the scene, he tried to arrest Billy, but the man who was shot refused to press charges. Ironically, the next morning, the county sheriff received a call from Muncie, Indiana, and there was a warrant for the fallen preacher's arrest on armed robbery and escape. Armed with that information, the sheriff went back to the scene of the shooting, where Billy had spent the night, and he tried to arrest him. Yet, as the sheriff attempted to put the handcuffs on him, Billy began swinging, and after a brief brawl, he was arrested and extradited back to Indiana, where he was sentenced to prison back at the Indiana State Farm. Now, do you think Billy Dean Anderson was just going to be a model inmate and serve his time for the next 5 years? No, not a chance. Within a month, he'd escaped from prison, and the newspapers began referring to him as Slippery Billy. With all the notoriety, he began using aliases such as James Forrester and William.
So now looking back at the original statement of the different characters that he referenced in the beginning, it would seem as though the pattern was in fact going against authority more than anything else. That would be the consistent thing.
Yeah.
William David Upchurch, as he bounced from job to job, usually staying no longer than a paycheck at a time. He found himself working as a farmhand outside of Bowling Green, Kentucky. The plantation was located near Park City State Bank, and within a few days, Billy Dean showed up in the lobby, but not to make a deposit. He walked right up to the bank teller and pulled a gun and demanded that they empty the drawer. But he wasn't satisfied with the amount, so he marched all 14 bank customers and 5 bank employees into the vault, where he made the employees continue filling the money bag. He locked everybody in the vault, and he made his escape with a cool $13,212. He knew he couldn't stick around, and by nightfall, he was back in East Tennessee. But he was nervous and spooked that the cops were on his trail.
So he just keeps
Stacking it up.
going up high to bigger and bigger things, though.
Oh, like a bank instead of like a small store.
Yeah,
or
like it just keeps getting like
that power.
Yeah.
That they say. I mean, there's lots of sayings that say, you know, you can test a man's character by giving him power.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah.
And more money.
Yeah.
That wasn't enough money for him. He started out with $17.
Yeah.
The first time.
You can't quench that hunger.
Then $2,600, I think it was.
Yeah.
And now $13,000, which for this time is
Also,
an astronomical amount of money.
He essentially keeps getting away with it.
Because he's Slippery Billy. That's why.
Trail. He picked up an old friend, and the two were driving erratically down a dirt road when suddenly he saw blue lights in the rearview mirror. Now, these Tennessee cops didn't know anything about the robbery in Kentucky, but Billy Dean's heart, it was racing. In his mind, this is surely what this traffic stop was all about. As the highway patrolman approached the criminal's car, Billy opened the door and he rolled into the road with guns blazing. He quickly got off 4 rounds, hitting the highway patrolman in the shoulder, 1 bullet lodging in the police car, and another bullet narrowly missing a second officer. The 4th bullet went wild and shot Billy's passenger in the spine. The highway patrolman quickly returned fire with 4 rounds of his own. 1 bullet went through the outlaw's ear, 1 grazed his head, and 2 hit him in the stomach. Billy was severely wounded, and he would need braces for the rest of his life in order to walk. After his stint in the hospital recovering, with 24-hour-a-day police guards to make sure he couldn't escape, he was sentenced to 10 years in Tennessee and forever banished from the state.
Wait, what did they say about not being able to escape? Even with the braces, they were worried about him still escaping?
Yeah.
Wow.
And he would need braces for the rest of his life in order to walk. After his stint in the hospital recovering, with 24-hour-a-day police guards to make sure he couldn't escape, he was sentenced to 10 years in Tennessee and forever banished from the state of Indiana. Yet, in prison, deprived of alcohol and guns, Billy turned into the model prisoner, rededicating his life to the Lord and producing many beautiful paintings. His good behavior earned him an early release in 1966. Ironically, when he was released, he was banished from his second state, this time Tennessee.
So no Indiana and no Tennessee. Banished. Can you get banished from a
So
state
began
now?
a vicious cycle for Billy Dean Anderson,
No idea.
constantly moving back and forth from East Tennessee to Indiana, always leaving a wake of violence wherever he went. In late 1966, Billy was possibly drunk again when he ran an oncoming truck that happened to be driven by the Fentress County Sheriff off the road. The sheriff quickly turned around and chased the perpetrator down. Billy calmly stopped and opened fire, shooting the off-duty sheriff's truck door. The sheriff ran and took cover in the ditch, but Billy kept firing. The bullets were kicking up dust in the sheriff's face, and Billy took another shot at the truck passenger. After a few moments, the bullets stopped, and the sheriff thought that Billy was out of bullets, so he attempted to arrest him. Billy stuck his pistol in the sheriff's gut and pulled the trigger, but the gun didn't fire. Upon examination, the gun did in fact have 1 more bullet in it. Back to jail Billy went for another 2 years. By now,
How at this point do people like get out of jail? Like, you're just like, you know what, this person might just need to just stay there. Like,
Because I feel like the way that the law works, it's all separate.
like
Like
it's
they-
looking at each individual. account.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that certain judges look at your past, and so they'll give you the fullest amount of time that you deserve or whatever because of your past, where they might be more lenient if you have no past. But because they're treating them all separately, you know, there's I don't know how that works.
1970.
Maybe he
was out again back in Muncie,
We don't
Indiana,
know.
working
Maybe he
as
had
a gas
silver
station
tongue.
cashier. When a man pumped $5 gas and refused to pay for it, Billy pulled out his gun and pointed it at the man. A weapons charge on a convicted felon was enough to send him back to the Indiana State Farm. But he was back on the streets again in 1973. His next encounter with the law occurred late one night as Billy and some thugs attempted to break into the liquor store when a silent alarm called the police. When they arrived on the scene, they found Billy Dean Anderson standing in the front of the store with a stolen.
True story, real quick.
Uh-oh. I'm
So
nervous about
obviously,
this.
you know, a lot of people can handle their liquor, okay?
Yeah.
But we do see a pattern here in this particular incident. So I knew a guy one time who was calm and cool as a cucumber, quiet, to himself, shy, this and that. But when he had a few drinks, he would just become so wild. Like, I'm telling you, this guy was just so gentle and, like, just very to himself, reserved, didn't, you know, say much, really nice guy, whatever. Couple of drinks, and he's stealing cop cars. And on cop car, like, chases and stuff, and just something happened when he drank, but,
Whoops.
like, would continue to drink. But I know, obviously, most people are not like that, but that wasn't a situation.
Military rifle. He quickly pointed the rifle at the cop, who was pointing his own shotgun back at him. And after a 10-second stare down, Billy lowered the gun and surrendered. Yet, when the cops examined the stolen gun, they found that Billy had indeed pulled the trigger, as the firing pin had hit the primer on the bullet. But it didn't fire. So after posting a $1,500 bond, he was a free man again. Billy's life was spiraling out of control, and he was clearly running out of time.
Running
But he
out.
couldn't stop.
Did Billy have these, like, cool cars that they keep showing? Because he was a mechanic.
In October of
I don't know if he was
1973,
just into
he and two
cars.
other men
I don't
committed
think you've
armed
heard of
robbery
stolen
of the
cars
Farmers
yet,
Bank of
either.
Moreland in Indiana, and they got away with $12,000. During the getaway, they drove right through a police roadblock and escaped. They would have to lie low until the money ran out. And soon it did, and Billy once again resurfaced in Tennessee.
So I
Tennessee.
do feel like for a criminal, right? I feel like, you know, sometimes you weigh the risk versus the reward. Like, if you think about it, if you you didn't have those kind of morals, but you were willing to take these risks, or maybe you were in some kind of emergency or whatever, I think there would be like more people maybe now that would have been like, oh, I have a good chance of probably getting away with a robbery for this much money at a bank, and if I get caught, I get 10 years and then I'm out. I'll take that chance. I think people would do that. Now I think, like, it's one, not very easy. Two, you probably get like way more than 10 years. I don't know anything about law and bank robberies.
Well,
I'm just speculating.
Now you can't. Now you can't lie low. There's no way to lie low anymore. I mean, there's literally surveillance everywhere.
Yeah.
So you couldn't do that now. But, you know, I don't know. I feel like in general there was more of an expectation to act well during this time. So there was less people acting like a fool. But I don't know. He's hungry. He's hungry for the $12,000 pop every couple.
He bought Kenneth an ice cream cone
With that money.
Should have bought you 3 ice cream cones.
We don't know. We don't know that, okay? We don't know that. We actually don't know anything really about this guy, okay? Like, truthfully, he could have had a doppelganger. That was...
You know what?
There was the one guy who was a stand-up guy, and there was another guy who was his doppelganger that was doing all this crimes.
We recently did a video where a guy told a really crazy story, and we were watching it and eating it all up, and at the end, the guy was like, I just made this up. That's messed up.
On December 30th, 1973, an East Tennessee sheriff responded to a burglary call at a local honky-tonk. In his own words, this is what transpired when he arrived on the scene. There were 2 cars there, parked in front of the club, a red and white 1955 Ford and a white Pontiac. I went to the door, around behind the building, and someone had been picking at the door, and the wall beside the door was a sledgehammer and a steel bar. I peeped around the corner of the building. I just stuck my head around, and there he stood with his gun on his shoulder. I jerked my head back, and I ran to my car and tried to leave, to try to call for help. I took out running around the building. Suddenly, I heard a gunshot, and it blew a hole in the rear door of my car. The next shot busted through the rear door window, through the cage, and through the seat under the headrest, and it cut the zipper in 2 on my jacket. I had been hit in the arm. I was hurt bad, and as I sped off, I could still hear gunshots.
And he always rolls solo for the most part?
He had blown the bone out of my upper arm,
One time there was
even the
someone in
artery.
passenger seat.
I was spurting blood all the way. I made it to a gas station, where I passed out, but the owner drove me to the hospital. Back to jail Billy went, this time in Morgan County, Tennessee, where Slippery Billy struck again. He managed to cut through a 1/2-inch steel plate wall and a heavy-duty lock, and he walked out of jail a free man again. But this time, he had went too far, and he was now considered a cop killer. And he was placed on the 10 most wanted list in America by the FBI. The FBI launched into an all-out manhunt, combing the mountains of East Tennessee, all of Kentucky and Indiana. They searched as far as Los Angeles and Mexico. Every FBI office in the country wanted Billy Dean Anderson, dead or alive. Soon, East Tennessee was swarmed with helicopters, bloodhounds, secret agents, and strangers wearing earpieces, asking all sorts of questions of everyone in the area. But what they weren't prepared for was that none of these mountain folk would tell them anything. I mean nothing.
Oh my God.
None of them would help them. Like Billy Dean, nobody in these
Yeah,
mountains
because what if he
trusted
gets
the
out
law.
again?
Most folks didn't even
There's little
believe Billy
baby
had
Kevin.
done half of
No,
what
I'm
he was
just
accused of. And while the FBI considered Billy a notorious outlaw, folks around here considered him an absolute legend. And they helped Billy Dean any way they could. Friends helped him. Strangers helped him. Moonshiners helped him. Everybody loved him. All told, Billy Dean evaded the FBI by living in a cave in the remote mountains that he knew like the back of his hand for nearly 5 years. His legend grew stronger and stronger. The FBI had given him the internal code name of Mountain Man.
Did he still have all
However,
the money?
even in the strongest knit community, eventually there's a snitch. And in July of 1979, someone provided an anonymous tip to the FBI of Billy's whereabouts. And armed with this information, agents swarmed the area and surrounded Billy's mother's home, where he frequently would be provided with supplies. And what happened that night on July 8th, 1979, may never truly be known. What is known is that Billy Dean Anderson stepped out of his mama's house and waved goodbye to her, not knowing that the entire area was swarming with FBI agents. The FBI claims that they asked him to stop and surrender, and that Billy Dean raised a .22 rifle at the lawman, forcing the agent to shoot him with 2 rounds of double-aught buckshot. And in that moment, all of Billy Dean Anderson's earthly troubles were taken away. The FBI also claimed that Billy had 2 more pistols on his waist at the time of the shooting. However, locals who were on the scene claimed that Billy was unarmed and that he was shot in the back with a hailstorm of bullets, 19 bullets, right in front of his mother. They claimed the FBI never intended to take him alive. They simply wanted him dead for embarrassing their agency for the past 5 years.
Wow.
And just like that, one of the wildest, unlikeliest of criminal careers came to an end. Ironically, Billy is buried in the graveyard of the same church that he used to preach at before he lost his way.
Wow.
And several of his paintings still adorn the sanctuary.
Wow. That is a wild
story.
story.
You know what? With an ending with 2 completely different story endings.
Yeah.
You know, you have to ask yourself how much of all of it is accurate, you know, and
Wow.
what this person's life was actually like.
I'm trying to remember. Obviously, it's my first time watching it. So Kenneth mentioned in his neighborhood, right? Everyone had Billy's back.
No, he just said they didn't know about any of the crimes he committed until after he was dead.
Okay.
They didn't know anything.
So the
Zip.
This where we see this picture right here. This wasn't his town, right? I can't remember what town this one was.
I think that those are the townsfolk. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
And he can say the top 10 most wanted.
Bottom of
ice cream.
Oh.
That's just so crazy.
You know, it just goes to show you. I tell people this sometimes when they're like having to cut somebody who's toxic out of their life. Not any single person is all bad. They just there's always a soft spot in every person. Now, whether or not that means that they deserve to be in your life or that they're not, that doesn't mean that they're not toxic to a person or whatever. But, you know, that makes it hard sometimes. Yeah. Like, that makes it hard. Like, his mom, you know, is providing, it's his mother. He probably has a soft spot for his mom, you know. So to her, he's Billy.
Yeah.
But to other people, he's, you know, a very scary criminal. So, you know, that makes it difficult and kind of hairy, those kinds of situations, you know.
Yeah. Which is interesting because as he referenced Jesus at one point, it was like, to many people, he was like this amazing, miraculous man who was doing miracles and, you know, believed to be God and this and that.
To others, he was a rule breaker.
He was a rule breaker, sure. Yeah. Yep. And then to others, he was just Jesus. Like, oh, that's just my neighborhood
just that guy who lives down the road.
Yeah, that's just that. I remember that kid. True. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm sure that was true of all the people mentioned in the beginning.
Yeah.
So,
anyway,
it's just interesting.
Thank you so much for that. That was such a cool documentary. That was so cool sharing that, and that, you know, that you had a little piece of that experience in your life. Guys, if you want to request your own personal reaction video, or you want to show us something and share something about your life as well, you can find that link in the description box below. Like, subscribe, stay tuned, stay positive. Make sure you comment. We'll see you next time.
We love you guys.
Bye.
Bye.